I never planned to build a tech company before I turned 25. Honestly, it started as nothing more than a small project in my college dorm. Just me, my laptop, and a mind full of ideas I wasn't even sure would work. But somehow, through late nights, trial and error, and a stubborn belief that I could create something different, that little project grew. Before I knew it, investors were calling, customers were lining up, and my life was moving faster than I could process. I was proud, really proud, because everything I had built came from my own hands. No shortcuts. No handouts. No family legacy I could lean on. Just pure work. And maybe that's why what happened next hit me harder than anything I've faced before. My dad remarried 3 years ago, and I won't lie, at first I didn't think it would change much. I didn't live with him anymore, and I figured he just wanted companionship, someone to share the quiet mornings and the long evenings. His new wife, Vanessa, seemed polite enough in the beginning. She smiled a lot, asked gentle questions, tried to be friendly. I wanted to believe she was genuine. But over time the small things started to feel off. Tiny comments about money, questions about my work, random suggestions about how families should support each other financially. It was subtle, nothing I could call out without sounding paranoid. But the uneasiness was there. Always. And then came her daughter, Maya. She and I were close enough in age, but completely different in how we saw the world. She wanted fast success, fast recognition, fast rewards, everything in a hurry. There was nothing wrong with ambition, but she didn't want to work for anything. She wanted the finished product without the messy steps it took to get there. I tried to be patient. I tried to be understanding. I even gave her advice when she asked for it. But I started to realize she wasn't looking for guidance. She was looking for shortcuts. Shortcuts I wasn't willing to give. Things between us stayed civil, at least on the surface. But under that politeness, I could feel something building, something I couldn't quite name yet. And then one Sunday afternoon, everything broke open. My dad invited me over for lunch. A simple family gathering, or at least that's what I expected. I walked in, greeted everyone, sat at the table, and tried to enjoy the meal. But the air felt thick, like there was a conversation waiting to happen. Even my dad seemed uneasy, glancing between me and his wife like he didn't know how to start whatever they were planning to say. That alone made my stomach tighten. The awkward silence finally ended when Vanessa cleared her throat. She smiled, but it wasn't friendly. It was controlled, rehearsed, almost like she had practiced it in the mirror. And when she spoke, every word felt loaded. She said she had something important and sensitive to discuss with me. My father looked down at his plate as if he couldn't bring himself to meet my eyes. Then she began talking about family values, about how families support each other, how they share opportunities. I knew something was coming, but I still wasn't ready for what came next. She leaned forward, folded her hands, and said it as calmly as someone asking for salt at the dinner table. She told me I should transfer my tech business, my company, my work, my creation, to her daughter Maya. Because she needed it more. At first I honestly thought I misheard her. I blinked, waited for her to laugh, waited for someone to say it was a joke taken too far. But there was no joke. No smile. No laughter. She was serious. Dead serious. She started explaining how Maya deserved a fresh start, how she had potential, how a business like mine could give her the stability she needed in life. She said I was young, I had time to start again, and that giving the business to Maya would restore balance in the family. Every sentence felt more unbelievable than the one before. It was like listening to someone describe a world where logic didn't exist. My father didn't say a word at first. He just stared at the table, his jaw tight, his fingers tapping against the wood. And I realized something in that moment. This wasn't a sudden idea. They had planned this conversation. They had discussed it. My father knew. Maybe he didn't agree, but he knew. And for some reason he didn't warn me. I felt the anger rising in me, slow at first, then like a storm. I kept asking myself how she could even imagine asking something like that. How she could be so bold, so entitled, so unbelievably confident in the idea that I would just hand over everything I had worked for. Did she really think I would say yes? Did she really believe I would give away years of work simply because her daughter needed it more? But the thing that bothered me the most wasn't the demand. It was how she looked at me while saying it. Like she believed she was right. Like she believed the business wasn't truly mine. Like she believed I owed her daughter something. I asked her why. Why would she think I'd agree? Her answer shocked me even more. She said families should redistribute success so everyone could benefit equally. She said Maya had struggled more, and that made her more deserving. She said I was lucky, and luck should be shared. Lucky. That one word felt like a slap to the face. I wanted to remind her of the nights I slept on my dorm floor because I couldn't afford a mattress. The hours I spent debugging code until my vision blurred. The rejections from investors who told me my idea wasn't good enough. The loneliness of building something no one believed in until it finally worked. But I didn't say any of that. I just sat there, stunned, trying to process what was happening. And when I didn't immediately respond, she took my silence as agreement. She actually smiled, reached for a folder, and slid it across the table toward me. Inside were documents, transfer agreements already drafted. They expected me to sign. Right there. Right then. As if my company was nothing more than a gift basket you hand someone on their birthday. I felt something inside me shift. Something cold. Something sharp. Something final. I looked at my father, hoping he would step in, hoping he would say this had gone too far. But he didn't. He just waited. Quiet. Passive. Almost guilty. That was the moment I knew things would never be the same again. I took a slow breath, pushed the papers back across the table, and prepared to say something that would change everything between us. Maybe forever. But before I could speak, Maya walked in with a smile on her face like she already owned everything. Which is where everything truly began to unravel. Maya stepped into the dining room like she was walking onto a stage, her smile bright, confident, almost rehearsed. She looked at the folder her mother had pushed toward me and then at my face, and I could tell she already knew exactly what the conversation had been about. She wasn't surprised. She wasn't confused. She was expecting this. It was written all over her expression, like she believed this business was already hers and all we were doing now was finalizing the handover. She sat down across from me, folded her arms, and leaned back like she had earned the right to be part of this discussion. Nothing about her behavior made sense. We weren't close. She had never shown interest in the work I did. She never asked about the company unless it involved money or growth. Yet somehow, she was sitting there with the confidence of someone who believed the world owed her something. I tried to read her face, to understand what was going through her mind. But all I saw was expectation, pure expectation. It made my stomach twist because it confirmed what I had feared. This wasn't a simple misunderstanding. This was something they had been planning. For how long I didn't know. But it wasn't something they had come up with that morning. My father finally cleared his throat, but his voice was low and uncertain as he spoke. He said maybe we should discuss things calmly, that no one was trying to take advantage of anyone, and that family decisions require sacrifice. I couldn't believe he said that. Sacrifice, like giving away my life's work was something normal, something any reasonable person would do to keep peace in the family. I felt heat rising in my chest, a mix of frustration and disbelief. I asked him if he really agreed with what they were asking. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he rubbed his forehead with his palm and avoided meeting my eyes. That silence said everything I needed to know. He wasn't standing by me. He wasn't protecting me. He was choosing comfort, choosing quiet, choosing whatever made the household easier for him, even if it destroyed the trust between us. Vanessa took my silence as another opportunity and jumped in again. She began explaining that Maya had been struggling mentally and emotionally for years, that she had tried different career paths and failed, and that she needed a stable future. She said if Maya had the business, it would boost her confidence, give her purpose and help her grow as a person. She spoke like she was reading a prepared speech. Every sentence was polished, practiced, and painfully unrealistic. It wasn't that I didn't care about Maya's well-being. I did. But I couldn't understand how taking something from me and handing it to her would fix anything. If she wanted purpose, she could build something herself. If she needed support, I could offer guidance. But none of that mattered to them. They wanted the final product, not the journey. They wanted the reward, not the effort. The whole thing felt surreal. I kept glancing at the folder on the table, trying to wrap my mind around the fact that legal documents had already been prepared. Someone had sat down, typed out the details, printed them, and placed them neatly inside that folder with the expectation that I would sign without question. It made me wonder how deep this plan went. Did they talk to a lawyer? Did they tell anyone else? Did they already tell Maya's friends or family that she'd be taking over a tech company soon? That possibility made my chest tighten even more. Maya finally spoke, and her tone was what surprised me the most. She didn't sound nervous. She didn't sound grateful. She sounded entitled. She said she knew how successful my company was, how much potential it had, and how she could take it to the next level. She said she had big visions for it and that maybe I could stay on in some smaller role like an advisor. An advisor. To something I built. I stared at her, completely speechless. I wasn't sure whether to laugh, cry, or walk out. This was the first time I realized something important. Maya actually believed she deserved this. She wasn't forcing it. She wasn't stealing it. In her mind, this was a fair exchange. She genuinely saw herself as the rightful heir to something she had never lifted a finger to build. I asked her what she would do with the company, just to see if she had any idea what she was talking about. She began listing vague ideas about expanding, rebranding, and making it more modern, none of which made any real sense. I knew she had no background in tech, no experience in business, no understanding of the systems, the algorithms, the infrastructure, the customer base. Nothing. She was talking the way someone talks when they've never run anything but think confidence alone can carry them. My father looked almost relieved when she started talking, like he believed her confidence made the plan sound better. Vanessa kept nodding proudly as if Maya were proving some point. I felt like I was the only person in the room who still lived in reality. I told them calmly that I wasn't signing anything. The words came out slow but firm. The moment I said it, I saw the entire room shift. Vanessa's expression hardened. My father tensed. Maya's smile faded. It was as if they all suddenly realized their plan wasn't as simple as they thought. Vanessa said I was being selfish. She said I was letting pride come before family. She tried to guilt me by saying I was abandoning Maya in her time of need. I tried to stay respectful, but inside I felt something breaking. I had never been someone who needed praise or recognition, but hearing someone call my entire life's work selfish, just because I didn't want to hand it over, that hit hard. My father finally spoke again, but his voice was sharper now. He said maybe I was reacting poorly, that maybe I was too attached to the company. Too attached, like it wasn't normal to care about something I spent years building. Like it wasn't normal to protect my work. I took a deep breath and tried to keep my voice steady. I told them I wasn't giving my business away, that it wasn't even a discussion. Vanessa shook her head and whispered something under her breath. Maya crossed her arms and looked away, almost offended. And then Vanessa said something I will never forget. She said if I didn't want to give the business willingly, there were other ways to handle the situation. It wasn't a threat exactly, but it wasn't harmless either. It was something in between, something that made my entire body go cold. My father didn't correct her. He didn't tell her to stop. He didn't defend me. He just stayed silent. That was when I stood up from the table. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't slam anything. I just stood up and grabbed my jacket. Maya watched me with an expression I couldn't read. Vanessa looked annoyed. My father looked tired. As I walked toward the door, I heard Vanessa say something quietly to my father. Something that made him sigh heavily. Something that sounded like, "We'll handle it." And that was the moment I knew the situation was far from over. Because whatever they were planning, they weren't done. They weren't giving up. They weren't going to let this go easily. And deep down I could feel it, this wasn't just about the business. Something else was going on. Something deeper. Something I hadn't seen yet. And whatever it was coming. When I left my dad's house that day, the sky was already turning dark even though it was still afternoon. It felt like the world outside matched the heaviness inside my chest. I sat in my car for a long moment, gripping the steering wheel, not trusting myself to drive just yet. My mind kept replaying everything, Vanessa's calm demand, my father's silence, Maya's proud expression, and those final words I heard as I walked out, "We'll handle it." I didn't know what that meant, but something in Vanessa's tone made it clear it wasn't harmless. It felt like a warning, not loud but sharp enough to stay with me. I finally drove home, trying to push the conversation out of my mind, but the weight of it followed me like a shadow. When I got inside, my apartment didn't feel comforting like usual. It felt stiff and unfamiliar, like even the walls knew something was wrong. I dropped my keys on the counter and sat on the couch, letting the silence settle around me. For the first time since starting my company, I felt vulnerable. Not because the business was in danger, that part one could handle, but because the people who were supposed to be my family had crossed a line I didn't even know existed. I kept asking myself if I had missed red flags along the way. Maybe I had been too naive. Maybe I wanted a peaceful family so badly that I ignored signs pointing toward something else. My phone buzzed with notifications, emails, messages, reminders, but I ignored everything until one message caught my eye. It was from my friend and business partner, Reese. He had been with me since the early days back when we were testing code on a borrowed laptop. He wrote, "Need to talk ASAP. Something weird came up." My stomach dropped. I called him immediately. When he answered, his voice was tense. He told me that earlier that day, someone had reached out to our company's legal team claiming to be a representative for a new ownership transition. They asked questions about the process for transferring majority shares, about updating leadership permissions, about restructuring ownership. The request didn't come from anyone in our company. It didn't come from any investor. And it definitely didn't come from me. I didn't need time to guess who it was. I asked Reese if they had mentioned a name, and he said the message came from an email using an address tied to Vanessa's old business ventures. My jaw tightened. That meant she had already begun acting like the transfer was happening. She wasn't waiting. She wasn't curious. She was preparing. Reese didn't know the full story yet, so I gave him a short version, just enough for him to understand the situation without pulling him into the family drama. He was quiet for a long moment and then said, "Man, this is bad. And it's not just desperate. It's strategic." That word, strategic, echoed in my mind. I knew Vanessa was persistent, but strategic? That meant she had been thinking about this longer than I realized. It also meant she wasn't acting alone. After the call, I paced around my living room trying to make sense of everything. My father's silence suddenly felt heavier. Maya's confidence felt more suspicious. And Vanessa's calm tone felt planned. Another thought struck me. If Vanessa had already begun asking legal questions, what else was she willing to do? Was she planning to pressure my father to talk to me again? Was she preparing arguments? Documents? Did she expect me to fight back? Did she think I would eventually give up just to keep peace? It didn't matter. I wasn't giving anything away. But the more I told myself that, the more I realized this fight wasn't going to be simple. Over the next few days, things only got stranger. My father called me several times, but I didn't pick up. I wasn't ready to talk. I needed time to think clearly. Then he started texting, saying we should revisit the conversation, and that maybe the offer wasn't as unreasonable as it sounded at first. Offer. As if they were doing me a favor. I stared at those messages, wondering how he could be so blind. Or worse, whether he wasn't blind at all and simply didn't care. Meanwhile, Maya began posting things on social media. Subtle things. Vague things. Quotes about new beginnings, potential, taking bold steps in life, and finally getting what you deserve. Each post felt like a message she intended me to see. Maybe she thought it would make me insecure or pressured. Maybe she thought it would soften me. But instead it did the opposite. It made me realize she was preparing publicly for something she hadn't earned privately. And then out of nowhere I heard from my aunt, my dad's sister. She rarely contacted me unless it was about family events, so her call surprised me. The moment I answered, her voice sounded cautious. She said she had heard from Vanessa earlier that week. Vanessa told her I was considering handing over the business voluntarily to help Maya. My aunt called because she didn't believe it. She knew me well enough to know I wouldn't give up something like that. She asked me what was going on. I didn't tell her everything, but I told her enough to make her quiet for a full 10 seconds. Then she said something I didn't expect. She told me this wasn't about Maya's future at all. This was about control. According to her, Vanessa had tried similar things before. Subtler things, smaller things, like influencing financial decisions in the family, encouraging my father to invest heavily in projects connected to Maya, or pushing for responsibilities to shift in her favor. My aunt said she had always felt something was off, but she didn't want to interfere unless she had proof. She sounded truly worried. She asked if I was safe, if the business was protected, and if anyone else had access to my accounts. That last question made my heart thump harder. I rushed to my computer, logged into our internal system, and scanned through access logs. Everything seemed normal, but one detail stood out. A login attempt from an unfamiliar location 2 nights earlier. It was blocked, so nothing was accessed, but it meant someone was trying. Someone was trying to get in. Someone who knew what they were looking for. Someone who thought they had a right to it. I felt a chill run through me. That night I barely slept. Every sound in the apartment made me sit up. Every shadow felt like something I needed to pay attention to. Not because I felt physically in danger, but because I couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger was happening behind the scenes. The next morning I finally answered my father's call. The moment he heard my voice, he sounded relieved, like he had been waiting for that moment. But instead of apologizing or acknowledging the mistake, he started talking about how change is hard, how sometimes we must compromise, and how family unity matters more than pride. He kept circling around the same idea, that maybe giving up the business wasn't the worst thing in the world. I asked him one question. Just one. I asked if this was what he truly believed, or if he was speaking for Vanessa. He hesitated. And that hesitation, that silence, it told me everything. It told me he wasn't leading his own household anymore. And it told me Vanessa wasn't acting alone. She had him on her side. Whether willingly or out of pressure, I wasn't sure. But one thing became clear. This wasn't just a disagreement. This was a coordinated push. A push to corner me. A push to break me down. A push to take everything I built. And the worst part? I had no idea how far they were willing to go. All I knew was that the conflict was just beginning, and I could feel something bigger coming, something I wasn't ready for, something none of us were prepared to face. And once it arrived, there would be no going back. The days that followed felt tense in a way I had never experienced before. It was like living with a storm hovering over my head, waiting for the moment it would finally break. I tried focusing on work, but every time my phone buzzed, a tightness formed in my chest. I kept expecting another surprise, another attempt to get to my company, another message disguised as concern but meant to push me into surrendering. Reese noticed it too. He asked if I was sleeping, if I was eating, if I wanted to take a few days off. I told him I was fine, but my voice didn't match the words. My mind wasn't on product updates, meetings, or the new client partnership we had been working on for months. My mind was on that dining room table. On Vanessa's calm voice. On Maya's confident smile. On those documents that shouldn't have existed. The more I thought about them, the more I wondered whether they were sitting in a drawer in their house right now, waiting like a reminder of what they thought was already theirs. 2 days later, things escalated again. It started with a call from my lawyer, Mr. Han. He asked if I had recently approved any requests for ownership transfer or if I had been in discussions about restructuring the company. My pulse spiked. I told him no. He sighed heavily and said someone had contacted his office claiming to be acting on my behalf regarding the transition. They used personal details only family would know. That was when something inside me shifted. This wasn't just pressure anymore. This was interference. I felt anger building, but beneath it was something sharper, fear. Not fear of losing the business, but fear of what they were willing to do to get it. Fear of how far this plan really went. Fear that maybe I had underestimated how determined Vanessa was. After the call, I sat alone in the conference room for almost an hour. The walls were glass, but I felt boxed in like I couldn't breathe properly. My mind spun through possibilities. Had they talked to someone else? Had they contacted investors? Had they tried to convince my father to legally act on my behalf? I needed answers, and I needed them fast. I drove to my father's house that evening, not to argue, but to understand what I was actually up against. When I arrived, the house looked normal. Lights on, curtains half open, the faint sound of a TV playing inside. But the moment I knocked, I could feel the tension even before the door opened. Vanessa answered, and the polite smile she usually forced wasn't there. Her eyes scanned my face like she was trying to read my intentions. She stepped aside slowly, letting me in without a word. My dad sat on the couch, looking tired, like he hadn't slept either. Maya was there too, sitting on the opposite chair with her phone in her hand, tapping through something she quickly hid when she saw me. For a second, no one spoke. The air felt tight again, heavy with the same discomfort from the last time I was there. I told them calmly that someone had contacted my legal team pretending to act for me. I didn't blame anyone by name. I didn't raise my voice. I just said what happened and waited. My father's face fell, but he didn't look confused. He looked caught. Vanessa glanced at him, then at Maya, and then at me. Her voice was steady as she said she didn't know anything about it. But something in her tone felt off. Too smooth. Too practiced. Too prepared. I asked her directly if she had tried to reach out to my lawyer. She smiled, but not in a friendly way. More like she was trying to stay in control. She said she was simply exploring options. She said she was trying to understand the legal process, so the conversation would be more productive when we had it next time. She said she wanted to avoid confusion. Confusion. Like contacting my legal team behind my back was just helping. I looked at my father, waiting for him to stop her. To say it was wrong. To at least acknowledge things were going too far. But he only let out a weak sigh and said, Vanessa was trying to help. Help who? Certainly not me. Maya finally spoke, and her words almost didn't sound real. She said she had been doing research, that she already had ideas for rebranding, that she had started drafting social media campaigns for the business. Campaigns. For a business that wasn't hers. I felt a chill crawl down my spine. Not because of the campaign itself, but because she spoke with confidence, like she was already stepping into the role she believed belonged to her. She wasn't imagining it. She was preparing for it. I told them firmly that the business wasn't available for transfer. That I wasn't changing my mind. That the conversation was over. My voice was calm, but inside I felt a shaking anger trying to claw its way out. Vanessa leaned back, her eyes narrowing slightly. She said I was letting emotions block family progress. She said I wasn't thinking about the long-term impact on everyone involved. She said Maya had been through too much in life to be denied this opportunity. Opportunity. That word echoed in my mind. I asked her why she thought Maya deserved my business more than I did. Vanessa didn't hesitate. She said I was young. I was independent. I had many chances ahead. But Maya only had this one. She needed something stable. Something secure. Something guaranteed. Guaranteed. As if success could just be handed out like a prize. Then something happened that I wasn't prepared for. Vanessa stood up, walked to the cabinet behind the couch, opened a drawer, and pulled out the same folder she had slid across the dining table days earlier. She put it down between us again, her hand resting on top like she was claiming the space. She said, "We can make this easy or we can make this complicated." My father closed his eyes for a moment when she said that. Not in surprise, but in resignation. Like he knew these words were coming. Like he had already accepted them. My heart slammed hard in my chest. Easy or complicated? I asked her what complicated meant. She didn't answer directly. She just said there were legal pathways, family options, and cases where duties fall to the next of kin. She said it in this calm, steady tone that made her words feel even heavier. I stepped back. I couldn't sit anymore. I felt like the walls were closing in. Like the air was pulling away from me. Like nothing was safe. I told them I was done talking. That I wasn't signing anything. That they needed to stop contacting my team. That this wasn't a negotiation. As I turned toward the door, I heard Maya scoff softly under her breath. And Vanessa whispered something sharp to my father again. Something I couldn't catch fully, but one word stood out clearly. Leverage. I froze for a split second, my hand on the doorknob. Leverage. What leverage did they think they had? What exactly were they planning? The question burned through me as I stepped outside, the cold air hitting my face. The tension was no longer just about a business. It was deeper now. Darker. More personal. And as the door closed behind me, I could feel it in my bones. Whatever was coming next would push everything to the edge. I barely made it home before my phone buzzed again. I didn't recognize the number. It was a simple text, just 3 words. We know everything. No signature. No explanation. Just that. My stomach dropped. My first instinct was to think it was some prank, but the timing, the context, it didn't feel like a joke. Someone had access. Someone was watching, tracking, waiting. And whoever it was knew about Vanessa, Maya, my father, and me, everything that had been happening. I stared at the screen for what felt like minutes, trying to make sense of it. My mind went through a million scenarios at once. Was this Vanessa playing another game? Was Maya involved? Had my father been secretly giving them information without realizing how far they'd take it? Or was this an entirely new player I hadn't even considered yet? Someone outside my family who had been watching the business, waiting for me to make a move? I called Reese immediately. His voice on the line was sharp, tense. I told him about the message. He didn't even flinch. He simply said, "That's not just family drama anymore. That's surveillance. And it's getting personal." I felt a cold wave wash over me. Up until now, I had believed this was about greed, entitlement, and control within my family. But the text changed everything. Whoever sent that message knew more than they should. Someone was inside my personal space, observing my movements, monitoring my reactions, maybe even planning the next step. That night I barely slept. Every little noise made me jump. My apartment felt vulnerable in a way it never had. Every creak in the floor, every distant car horn outside, every notification from my phone made my pulse spike. I started questioning everything, every interaction with Vanessa, every text from my father, every smile from Maya. Was this all part of their plan or had someone else slipped in? The next morning I arrived at the office earlier than usual. I needed to review security logs, digital footprints, emails, access histories, anything that could explain the text. I felt like a detective trying to solve a puzzle that was constantly shifting. As I dug through the data, a pattern started to emerge. Someone had tried to access sensitive files multiple times over the last week. They weren't hackers in the traditional sense. They weren't random cybercriminals. These were calculated attempts, using inside knowledge about my schedules, my login times, even the way I structured certain projects. And the most chilling part? The login attempts came from multiple locations tied to family addresses. I leaned back in my chair trying to process it. It wasn't just Vanessa or Maya anymore. Someone was coordinating, maybe even manipulating, events from behind the scenes. Someone was combining family leverage with digital intrusion. The lines between personal and professional had blurred completely. Just when I thought the day couldn't get worse, my phone rang. Caller ID, unknown. I hesitated, but something compelled me to answer. A voice, calm but low, spoke. I suggest you reconsider your next moves. Some things are bigger than family loyalty, bigger than business, and bigger than you realize. You can fight it, but fighting it could cost everything. Before I could respond, the line went dead. I sat frozen, the words echoing in my head. Bigger than family. Bigger than business. Bigger than me. The message wasn't just a warning, it was a threat. And if someone knew to warn me like that, they were either deeply embedded in my life, or they had resources I couldn't even imagine. I looked around the office, suddenly aware of every reflection, every shadow, every movement. Who could I trust? Reese was loyal, yes, but how deep did this go? Could even he be a pawn without realizing it? And more importantly, what was Vanessa planning next? Later that day, I got an unexpected visitor. It was my aunt, the one who had warned me about Vanessa's previous manipulations. Her expression was serious, almost grave. She said she had something important to show me, something she had kept hidden because she didn't want to get involved until she knew the full scope. She handed me an old journal, my father's from years before Vanessa even entered the picture. My eyes scanned the pages and my heart started racing. The journal detailed business connections, agreements, and investments I had never known about. And then I found a passage that froze me in place. If anyone ever tries to take what I've built through family influence, there is a backup plan. They won't see it coming. It's hidden, but it's ready if needed. A backup plan? Hidden? Ready? I felt a mix of relief and unease. Relief because maybe there was a safety net, something I could use if Vanessa and Maya tried to push too far. Unease because it confirmed that my father, and maybe even Vanessa, was playing a longer game than I had imagined. Someone had thought about family betrayal years before it even happened. And now, that plan could be triggered by my next move, whatever it was. As I closed the journal, I realized the stakes had escalated far beyond what I had been preparing for. This wasn't just about handing over a tech business. This was about trust, loyalty, and control. It was about family secrets I hadn't known existed and about strategies so deep that even I, the founder, wasn't fully aware of them. That evening, I watched as Maya posted another picture on social media, a photo of her holding a laptop, smiling confidently, captioned with, "Sometimes the universe gives you what you need before you know it." The timing was too precise, too coincidental, or maybe too calculated. Vanessa called afterward, trying to sound casual, inviting me over to talk things out and find a solution. But I wasn't going to step back into that house. Not yet. Not when I didn't know who was truly behind the attempts to pressure me, manipulate me, or gain leverage over my life and business. I sat at my desk late into the night, looking at the documents, the logs, the journal, and Maya's social media posts. Everything was connected in a way I hadn't realized before. And one thought kept looping in my mind: they weren't just asking, they were planning, scheming, and possibly ready to escalate further. The conflict had grown beyond family dynamics. It had become a psychological game, a battle for control that stretched into both my personal and professional life. Every step I took now could trigger reactions I didn't fully understand. And someone somewhere was counting on me making a mistake. I leaned back, rubbed my temples, and whispered to myself, "This isn't over. It's only getting started." And I knew deep down that the next move, my move, would determine just how far Vanessa, Maya, and anyone else involved were willing to push. The stakes were higher than ever, the danger closer than I imagined, and the truth about what they were planning was still waiting to reveal itself. The day it all came to a head started like any other, but I felt the tension in my chest tighten with every step. I knew Vanessa and Maya were expecting me to come to the house, expecting me to negotiate or worse, to give in. But this time I had a plan, one that I hadn't shared with anyone except Reese and my aunt. A plan that relied not on emotion, but on strategy, preparation, and the small edge I had been building silently over the last few days. When I arrived at my father's house, the air felt heavier than usual. Vanessa opened the door before I could knock, her smile forced, a little too polished. Maya was standing behind her, holding herself with the same overconfidence she had shown all along. I didn't let their presence shake me. I stepped inside calmly, letting my eyes scan the room, observing the tension on their faces. Before they could speak, I pulled out a folder of my own, prepared, organized, and undeniably solid. I placed it on the table. "I've been doing my own research," I said quietly, looking directly at Vanessa and Maya. "And I think it's time we talk about facts, not assumptions or feelings." Vanessa's smile faltered. Maya's eyes narrowed. They weren't expecting this. I opened the folder, revealing documents, legal contracts, and digital logs. I had traced every attempt they, or someone acting on their behalf, had made to interfere with my business. I had proof of the login attempts, of messages, and even a timeline showing how every subtle move had been coordinated. You wanted leverage, I said, my voice steady. Here's the truth. Everything you tried to do has been documented. Every message, every attempt to access my legal team, every social media post calculated to pressure me, it's all here. Vanessa opened her mouth, but I continued. I've spoken to my lawyer. We've secured the company. Any attempt to force a transfer or manipulate ownership will have legal consequences. And trust me, I'm ready to act if necessary. Maya shifted in her seat, the confidence in her eyes flickering for the first time. I could see the realization hitting her. She hadn't accounted for this. She thought she could step into my world without consequence, but she hadn't understood that I had built protection, redundancy, and a network of allies who believed in the company as much as I did. Vanessa's voice, usually so calm and controlled, was sharper now. You're being dramatic. You don't need to go this far. I cut her off. No. This isn't drama. This is fact. And facts matter. For a long moment, the room was silent. My father looked caught in the middle, guilt and fear flickering across his face. I didn't know whether he would intervene or remain passive. Then Vanessa's expression shifted. A flash of frustration. A hint of desperation. She leaned forward and said, if you don't give Maya the business willingly, we can find other ways to make it happen. You don't know what's coming. I stayed calm. My aunt had warned me that Vanessa was relentless, and Maya's behavior had already shown she was ambitious to the extreme. But I had one final card I hadn't revealed yet, something even Vanessa hadn't anticipated. I smiled faintly. Funny you should say that, I said, because I already anticipated your moves. That's why I prepared something else. I tapped a button on my laptop. The screen behind me lit up, displaying a secure digital dashboard, a system I had secretly set up to monitor all potential interference with the company. Every recent attempt, every message, every suspicious login was visible. Even the message that had said, "We know everything," was logged and traced to an anonymous number that could be linked to one of Vanessa's previous contacts. The realization hit them both simultaneously. They had assumed I would react emotionally, that I would give in under pressure. They hadn't accounted for my preparation, my foresight, and my refusal to let them manipulate me. You thought you had leverage, I said softly, but the real leverage has always been mine. Maya's face went pale. Vanessa's jaw tightened. My father finally spoke, almost whispering, Faria, you've gone too far. I shook my head. No. I've finally gone far enough. The tension was almost unbearable. I could feel the room holding its breath, waiting for someone to make the next move. But before anything else could happen, Vanessa's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, frowning. The expression on her face shifted from control to alarm. I noticed it immediately. The number she received the message from matched the one that had sent me the anonymous text days before. We know everything. Her eyes widened. What? How? I didn't answer. I just watched as Vanessa's confidence collapsed in real time. Maya, standing beside her mother, looked confused, powerless, and for the first time, truly vulnerable. And then the final twist hit. From the dashboard, I traced the last login attempt. It wasn't Vanessa. It wasn't Maya. It was my father. He had been trying to manipulate both sides, thinking he could protect Vanessa while keeping me under control. But he hadn't realized that in trying to influence everything, he had left a digital trail. One I had anticipated, one I had secured, one that left him exposed. The room went silent again. My father's face drained of color. He couldn't deny it. He couldn't explain it. I leaned back slightly, letting the weight of the moment settle. This isn't about loyalty, family, or entitlement anymore. It's about accountability. And today, everyone involved sees the consequences of their actions. Vanessa's lips pressed tightly together. Maya didn't speak. My father looked down, ashamed, finally realizing that his inaction and secret interference had backfired completely. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt a sense of control returning. The business was safe. I had faced the manipulations head-on. I had exposed every attempt to undermine me. And yet, as I looked at their faces, I knew one thing. Nothing would ever be the same. Then, almost as if on cue, a final message appeared on my laptop. Another anonymous text. Only this one was different. You won this round. But the game isn't over. I stared at it, heart racing. My stomach tightened. The storm wasn't over. It had only shifted. But this time I was ready. And that made all the difference. After that day, the house felt different, not just for me but for everyone involved. I didn't expect Vanessa, Maya, or even my father to come quietly, but the confrontation had changed the dynamics in ways none of us could ignore. For the first time, the reality of my boundaries, and the consequences of overstepping them, was crystal clear to everyone. The tension didn't disappear overnight, but the worst of the uncertainty lifted. I spent the next few days reorganizing my priorities and tightening security around the business. Reese and I implemented extra layers of protection, not just digital but also legal, making sure that no outside interference, whether from family or otherwise, could threaten what we had built. Every access point, every contract, every shared account was reviewed and reinforced. I realized that what I had thought was just a tech business had become so much more, a testament to my persistence, a reflection of my judgment, and a symbol of independence I wasn't willing to compromise. Meanwhile, my father reached out to me quietly, not with more arguments or excuses, but with a tentative willingness to understand what had happened. It wasn't an apology yet, not fully, but it was a start. He admitted that he hadn't realized how far Vanessa had planned things, how subtly the pressure had been applied, or how much his inaction had enabled it. For the first time, he listened without deflecting, and I realized that sometimes confrontation, not avoidance, is what makes people see the truth. Vanessa, unsurprisingly, remained defiant at first, but the moment she saw that her leverage had evaporated and that I was prepared for every move, her confidence faltered. Maya, too, began to step back, the illusion of entitlement cracking as she realized that simply wanting something wasn't enough. Over time, they became quieter in their demands, more cautious, and eventually they stopped trying to interfere. It wasn't instant, and there were moments of tension, but eventually even the house seemed to settle. In the weeks following, I began reflecting on everything that had happened. I thought about the hours I had spent building the company from scratch, the late nights debugging code, the sleepless weekends, the investors who had doubted me, and the friends who had supported me when no one else believed in the vision. I realized that the fight with my stepmother and Maya wasn't just about a tech business, it was about respect, boundaries, and the value of effort. No one could take that away from me because it wasn't just tangible, it was part of who I had become. The anonymous messages, the login attempts, and the manipulations had been frightening, but they had also been lessons. I learned that trust has limits, that preparation is essential, and that being vigilant isn't paranoia, it's survival. I strengthened my internal systems, not just to protect the company, but to protect myself from being blindsided again. I knew now that ambition without effort could be dangerous when mixed with entitlement, and that even family could cross lines if boundaries weren't clear. Reese and I celebrated quietly one evening, not with loud parties, but with the satisfaction of knowing we had secured the company. He reminded me that building something from nothing wasn't just about technical skill, it was about resilience, judgment, and character. And in that moment I realized he was right. The business hadn't been threatened by outside investors or competitors, it had been tested by the people closest to me. And it had survived. Maya eventually started pursuing her own projects, though more cautiously. I made a conscious effort not to hold grudges, even though the memory of that confrontation lingered. I offered guidance only when asked, but I no longer allowed her ambition to overshadow my boundaries. In a way, I think she learned too, though slowly, that success isn't given, it's earned. Vanessa remained in my life only peripherally, and the dynamic with my father evolved into something more cautious but honest. He began to see the importance of defending what mattered, and I began to see that people can change when confronted with reality. That didn't erase the past, but it allowed us to move forward without constant tension. Looking back, the entire experience taught me that family, ambition, and business can be a complicated mix, but boundaries are non-negotiable. I learned that standing firm, calmly, strategically, and decisively, can turn what feels like overwhelming pressure into a moment of empowerment. I realized that protecting what you've built isn't selfish. It's necessary not just for yourself but for the integrity of your work and your life. The tech business itself continued to grow. With Reese and a strengthened team, we launched new projects, expanded to new markets, and reached milestones I had only dreamed of before. The experience with Vanessa and Maya became a story I shared selectively, mostly as a lesson about perseverance, vigilance, and the importance of preparing for unexpected challenges. It reminded me and everyone who heard it, that even when people close to you push against your boundaries, clarity, strategy, and courage can turn a conflict into a catalyst for growth. And yet, even as life seemed to settle, the anonymous messages and warnings never fully disappeared. The last one, the one that had said, "You won this round," But the game isn't over became a reminder rather than a threat. I realized that challenges, especially in business, are ongoing. The stakes may change, the players may shift, but being prepared, alert, and true to yourself is the only constant defense. That uncertainty, oddly enough, became a source of motivation. I also began mentoring young entrepreneurs, helping them understand that success isn't just about ideas or funding. It's about resilience, boundary setting, and learning to navigate difficult relationships without compromising integrity. I told them my story, carefully omitting any details that could identify my family, and focused on the lessons. The importance of protecting your work, trusting wisely, and never underestimating the lengths some people might go to gain control. Eventually, the story of the stepmother, Maya, and the attempted takeover became less about fear and more about empowerment. I realized that conflict, while stressful and sometimes painful, can clarify who you are, what you stand for, and what you're capable of protecting. My business, my independence, and my principles had survived the test, and that survival became part of my identity. Months later, I received a final message, not threatening but almost congratulatory. You proved yourself. The rest is up to you. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The words weren't a warning anymore. They were a reminder that life and business are a series of challenges, and only those who stay vigilant, determined, and principled come out stronger. As I sat in my office one evening, looking out at the city lights reflecting off the glass buildings, I realized that the story wasn't just about protecting a tech business from manipulation. It was about self-respect, strategy, and knowing your worth. It was about understanding that family dynamics and business ambition can collide in unexpected ways, and that only by standing firm, acting with integrity, and preparing for the unexpected can you truly win. And in that quiet moment, I smiled, knowing the business was safe, my independence intact, and my life back on course. But somewhere deep down, I also knew one truth. The world will always test you, people will always try to push boundaries, and the fight for what matters never truly ends. But if you approach it with clarity, courage, and resilience, you can turn even the most intense conflicts into victories. The stepmother's demands, Maya's confidence, and the family drama that once threatened everything became lessons etched into the foundation of my life. I didn't just survive the storm, I learned to anticipate it, navigate it, and grow stronger from it. And as I closed my laptop that night, ready to head home, I realized that the true victory wasn't just the business, it was me. I had faced manipulation, pressure, and deception, and I had come out standing, clear-minded, and unbroken. And just as I locked the office door behind me, I felt a strange sense of closure. The business was mine, my family dynamics were defined by new boundaries, and my future, though uncertain in many ways, was completely under my control. The storm had passed and I had weathered it. For the first time in a long time, I felt fully, undeniably free.